Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s with this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes, 1987 at online booksellers everywhere. One of my viewers wanted me to talk about how hustle culture propaganda is pushed onto black and Hispanic men. Now, I can't speak for Hispanic men, but I can speak for black men as related to hustle culture, and hustle culture as related to black men really has its roots in slavery. Now, hustle culture, the modern definition of it is when a workplace environment places such an intense focus on productivity, ambition, and success with little regard for the rest, self-care, or any sort of work-life balance for the workers. Now, hustle culture is something that is pushed very differently in the black community, and oftentimes black people are made to feel guilty about periods where they aren't productive by many white and non-black managers, and that push to make black people feel guilty about not being so-called productive actually has its roots in slavery. Now, it has its roots in slavery because back in the days of the antebellum South, the slave master really felt insecure about slaves being idle, and because they felt insecure about slaves being idle, they used overseers to punish any slave who was not going out here and working regularly. And this whole culture of fear as related to hustle culture presents an intense focus on black male and black female workers, where they start to feel afraid and start to feel guilty about not actually doing anything on the job during idle periods in the workplace. And this is why many black workers work so intensely, because they feel like they may possibly wind up getting punished in today's modern workplace. They fear that they may get fired as related to periods of idleness on the job. And because they fear this is why the hustle culture is pushed in black as related to black workers. Many black workers have been dealing with this for years, and we've been dealing with it because many white bosses participate in racism. They always go out of their way to say, oh, the black worker is lazy because they're not really doing anything at that point. And they want to go out here and not only shame that person for not working, but they also want to threaten their job with termination. This is something I ran into back when I was working at the Food Emporium. I remember when I was bagging groceries and I was taking a minute to assess the customer's order to see how I wanted to bag it. And the woman got upset about me being so-called idle and wanted to argue with the cashier about me being idle. Now, she didn't understand that a person needs to take a moment to sit there and think about what they're going to do. No, what they want to do is make it where they feel like, oh, you're not working fast enough for them and you need to work fast for them, not understanding that people need a moment to actually take a moment to think. And this was the first time I ran into that kind of racism as related to the workplace, because what the bosses want the black workers to do is rush. Meanwhile, a white worker could go out here and take that time to think. And again, that's the impact of racism on this hustle culture, which is basically racist feeling guilty and angry about a black person not moving fast enough for them and having little regard for their rest, self-care, or their work-life balance. They don't have regard for that person because they don't see that person as a person. Now, a second time I ran into this kind of racism was when I was working at a law firm. And as I was working at this law firm, I was sitting there waiting for the phone to ring, and the bosses were mad because, oh, you're not doing anything. Well, I've only been here for barely 2 weeks, and I haven't been trained to do anything. But they felt so afraid of a black man not working that they were telling me, oh, you're not doing anything. But if I have not been trained to do anything, then how can I do something? Again, this is the type of hustle culture that they push onto black workers, and they use this as a tool to go out here and bully and harass black workers. This is done to go out here and make the black worker feel guilty about being idle, because according to the white and non-black bosses, an employee who is black needs to be constantly working in order for them to feel secure about the quality of their work. Whenever it's a black worker, what they want to do is go out here and say, oh, this black worker has to constantly be in action. And again, this is about trying to put it where they feel, again, fearful, oh, this black person is lazy. These go back to old stereotypes that have been created during the days of the antebellum South regarding black workers. They want to go back to that as their narrative because they believe, oh, a black worker, they are lazy, they are incompetent by default, and in order for them to feel adequate about that black worker, they need to see that black worker constantly in action. Meanwhile, a non-black worker or a white worker can go out here and sit there all day, and they can sit there all day. They can have their coffee, they can go order their clothes online, they can go out here and have lunch. But the black worker, oftentimes, they are made to feel guilty about going out here and taking a break. No, according to these bosses, the black worker has to constantly be working in order for them to feel secure about getting their money's worth out of their labor. And again, this goes all the way back to slavery, because during slavery, the slave master felt like he wasn't getting his money's worth unless the slave was constantly working, and he felt like the slave was a property and not a person. And because the slave master felt like the slave was his property, that property was supposed to keep functioning like one of the machines on his plantation, like the wagons that transported the cotton and tobacco, or the cotton gins that he had. He did not see a slave as a person who needed rest or self-care, and he did not have any sort of work-life balance for them because he didn't see them as human beings. And the same thing happens with this modern hustle culture. The modern hustle culture dehumanizes people on the job. And when it comes to black workers, oftentimes black workers get dehumanized by white and non-black bosses who are so caught up in their obsession with productivity and ambition and success that they don't have regard for the black workers who work there. No, they don't see the black workers as human beings, and because they don't see the black workers as human beings, they have little regard for how the corporate culture they are having is toxic and has an impact on a black person's mental health. Because when I was working at that law firm back in 2002, it really had a major impact on my mental health that this employer didn't have regard for me and was out here trying to say, oh, you're being idle when you're not being trained. And again, if I'm not being trained, how can I be productive? And again, this again affects your mental health because the employer has no regard for you. And again, this little lack of regard makes it shatters your confidence, it shatters your self-esteem, and it makes it where you feel like you are worthless and you're going to a job where you're not really getting anything outside of it but a paycheck, and you're not being respected as a worker. And this really makes you dread wanting to come into that job every day, because you're coming into an environment where people just don't appreciate anything you do. It's all about their results, but not about giving you the space so that you can go out here and produce those results. And that is the thing that frustrates many black men and women on the job. When we go into a workplace environment, the bosses, especially white and non-black bosses, are so caught up in their racism and their insecurities about black productivity that they go out here and project things onto black workers. And even if you go out here and put the most effort into the job, you're still seen as lazy. I mean, I remember working at the City College of New York in their science library, and even though I was putting in solid work, still was seen not as doing enough for them. And again, this is all part of the things that many of these white and non-black bosses, and even some of these black female bosses, do. Nothing you do is ever good enough for them. Nothing you ever do ever comes out making things right, and nothing you do will ever please them. And again, these people don't regard your time. They don't regard you as a person, and they want you to go out here and do extra for them, but they want to do nothing for you, all while going out here and saying that you are doing nothing for them. And what these individuals really want to do is foster a codependent relationship with you, where they have all of the power and the leverage, and you have absolutely nothing at all. And that's what happens inside of these work environments for a lot of black workers. For a lot of black workers, we'd have to deal with a very abusive environment where we're told that our work isn't good enough, and we're also not having people regard our requests for days off, not looking to give us any time for our own space. No, they want to keep pushing you, and they believe that they have to push you because you're lazy. Even worse, what they believe they have to do is watch you because you're not doing the work the way they trust you to do. And because they don't trust you to do the work, what they do is say that you need to be watched constantly because the black person is lazy and cannot go out here and do work without being watched, not understanding that your lack of trust is basically rooted in fear, and the fear is rooted in old racist stereotypes that go back to slavery, because the slave master believed, oh, the slave is lazy, the slave isn't working hard enough, the slave isn't working fast enough, the slave is not constantly in motion, and in order for him to feel secure and inadequate about himself as a man, he needs to see that black worker constantly rushing and running around, and that's what they believe they need to see in order for that black person to be productive in their eyes. But in the real world, people do need to go out here and have moments of rest. They do need to have moments where they need to do self-care, like taking care of their hygiene or taking care of themselves, like getting haircuts or going shopping. People do need time to breathe, and they do need days off where they can just sit back and chill. This is what people need in order to reset their brains so that they won't be in a perpetual state of anxiety. And it's not good to be in a perpetual state of anxiety on a job. I mean, you shouldn't be afraid that you're going to be fired because you make one mistake or you don't do things right one way. But this is something black workers like myself have had to deal with for years. We have to deal with the anxiety as related to the slave drivers in many jobs, white, non-black, and black, sitting there and looking to drive you extra hard because the white people at the top feel insecure about a black person working for them, and you live in fear and anxiety about being fired for making the most simple of mistakes. Meanwhile, a white, Hispanic, or Asian, or non-black person, they can go out here and make all the mistakes they want, and everybody understands. But the black person, they have to have such an intense focus on productivity, ambition, and success to the point where they want to be perfect every time. And that pressure can lead to a lot of impact on a person's mental health, to the point where they have severe anxiety about going to work, and they have severe anxiety and stress regarding going to work every day, because you want to hustle as related to getting success, but it shouldn't be an obsession to the point where you don't have any sort of satisfaction at the end of the day. And when it comes to many of these jobs these days for black workers, there's just so much stress on them. And it's that stress, again, that drives a lot of black people to, again, that's the thing where they believe they have to just keep working, and they have to keep working because they feel guilty about possibly being fired, and feel anxious about getting fired if they make one slip up or one misstep. And again, this is something that is all part of the hustle culture, but the hustle culture's roots come from slavery, and the whole roots of hustle culture come from slavery, because it's an employer who does not trust the workers to go out here and do their job. It's a boss who doesn't trust people to go out here and do what needs to be done. And that really flies in the face of everything, because when you hire someone, you're supposed to have faith in their abilities, faith in their talent, and you're supposed to trust that their ability to get work done, it may not be done the way you want it to be done, but it's going to get done. I myself know, working for myself, things get done, and I don't try to push myself as hard these days, because there was a time when I would even push myself so hard that I was basically starting to break down mentally for myself, because I still had that guilt as related to these jobs that I had in the past. And the whole thing is, you wind up having so much push to try to get success that you start having it impacts your mental health. And again, this is something black people have to understand. It's not about getting the work done fast. It's about getting the work done up to a standard. And sometimes it may take time to do that. And it's best to take that time to do that. These days, when I'm working on books I don't really rush the stories or the ideas, because I understand rushing the stories and the ideas is not going to get me success. No, it's going to lead to a poor quality story, and I have to take time for myself. And sometimes you just have to take days off from working, take days off from doing different things. Sometimes a lot of the videos you guys watch were pre-recorded, and they were pre-recorded because I wanted to take a day to go do something else. And again, you need to have time to go rest. You need to have time to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to enjoy your success. And that's why hustle culture is toxic, because yes, you're working towards success, but you never get a chance to enjoy it, because there's always something new that you have to do. And sometimes you just need to take a moment, get back and disconnect from what you're doing, so that you can just take some time for yourself. And sometimes when you take some time for yourself, it can give you perspective on what you're trying to do. So hustle culture is toxic, especially for black workers, because a lot of managers use it to go out here and participate in anti-black racism. They use it to go out here and participate in anti-black racism to drive workers to work harder than their white and non-black counterparts. And this discrimination makes it where a black worker is scrutinized by a different standard. And as they're scrutinized by a different standard, they have all sorts of racist ideals projected onto them, like being lazy, not doing work up to standard. And this leads to bosses wanting to threaten a worker who's doing a good job, and looking to go out here and punish a worker for doing what everybody else is doing, as related to taking breaks and going out here and having lunch. You want to punish this person for going out here and doing what normal people do. And that, again, is racist in and of itself. And again, the hustle culture is not good for the mental health of black workers, because it affects our mental health, because it shatters our confidence, lowers our self-esteem, and makes it where we don't feel like we're ever going to be an adequate worker. And it makes it where we just don't feel like we can measure up in this job. And again, this affects a worker to the point where they become anxious, they become depressed, and they just feel like nothing they can do can ever measure up on the job. So instead of hustle culture, I want to go out here, and when I do projects like John Haynes at Death's Door, I try to give people space and time and let them relax, because I know that they've got other projects going on, and I like to give anybody I'm working with the space and time that they need to do their own thing, because they are working for me to do their own thing. And they need that space to do their own thing. They need that time to breathe, that time to hang out, that time to relax. Everybody needs time for themselves. And there's a time to work, there's a time to grind, and there's also a time to go out here and enjoy life. Now, this was a video requested by one of my viewers, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation to the Cash App or the PayPal, and if I know something about that subject, I will make that video for you. And if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, the Thetas, or my vampire novel Eternal Night, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's Aspiring Angel takes on a wicked werewolf in this action-packed all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman in paperback and e-readers today.